So hi and welcome to Rise Up and Carve. Welcome to our first demo of the year, which is super exciting. I am going to pass the baton over to John to do the introduction for our demo. And welcome if you're new. Glad to have you here. And we have lots of fun stuff planned for the year. So Chuck sends his love. He's unable to be here today. But with that, I will send it over to you, John.
Hey everybody, I can't believe how many people are here. I'm so happy that everybody decided to jump on. Kyle and I have known each other for it's close to a year now, I think. I've been to several of his shows. I've just seen how he interacts with people when they come up to look at his spoons, and he's just really knowledgeable and smart woodworking guy. And I thought everybody should get to meet Kyle, so I talked him into doing this. So it's my fault. I'm sorry, Kyle, but here we are, and go ahead, do your thing.
Yeah, thanks. Well, so yeah, I'm out here in Denver, Colorado, born and raised. Kind of started woodworking probably 8-9 years ago. Then picked up spoon carving probably about 5 years in, so about 5 years ago now. I kind of really, it's a very addicting form, and it's a subtractive process rather than an additive process. So it kind of works a different set of my mind when I'm kind of working just in general. But I think we're gonna kind of just jump right into the spoon that kind of I gave you guys. It's for those that don't really carve long bold spoons and eating spoons, this spoon is going to be really, it's going to feel long. Like the bowl is going to feel really long, and it's going to be thin. It's going to be a lot thinner than you think you're going to kind of want to carve it. It's also got a lot more crank than you think. So those that are afraid of crank or kind of misunderstand crank, we'll kind of demystify that a little bit here today, hopefully. I got a couple samples here that I kind of carved over the last couple of days. I'm going to cheat and actually use the original template or the original spoon rather than use the template itself. But I carve these regularly. I do markets all throughout the year. I carve while I'm at markets, and I carve while I'm at home, and kind of carve in front of people. It kind of shows you your flaws in kind of safety like concerns, kind of more or less, where your fingers are. You don't want to show people that you're going to cut a finger off, and you become a little bit more hyper aware in kind of those scenarios. So I think it's made me a better carver to carve in front of people and in market settings. So I always advocate for it. If you can get one with a group of people, do it, because you're going to learn a lot from them. But mostly at my markets, I'm just purely demonstrating. A lot of these people don't carve spoons, never carved a spoon before. I'm going to assume that most of you guys have at least attempted to carve a spoon or are proficient at it. So I'm not going to start at the very beginning. And I'm not going to really start. I got a billet kind of laid out already. So I'm not going to go through the whole process of breaking down a log. And I mean, you can imagine it's a lot of sawing and splitting with an axe and wedges and a pro. We're going to start with this log here. Luckily I got a really good source just down the road. This is a little bit of pear. Lucky, this could be a little bit squirrely grain for this, but we're just going to go with it. I think it's going to be good. General eating spoons. I never really work a general eating spoon more than 3 fingers. Your mouth is usually 2.5 fingers wide, is about as wide as a spoon needs to be to fit in your mouth. That said, that's about 2 5/8 maybe, or 1 5/8 wide at the very tip of the bowl. Any bigger than that, you're really stretching. I got a big mustache. Actually, a thinner spoon is actually handier. I don't know what I'm gonna have like a metric guy out here, speaking some metric out there. So 1.5 inches. What is that? 1 5/8. Is that 35 mil or something like that?
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood.
What do you do, Ron? You divide it by 2 and then you add 60?
Yeah.
No, that's temperature. That only works for temperature. Nice try, Kevin.
Oh, sorry.
I got an easy one. It's currently 0 in my workshop, so that's nice.
Yeah, that's
I can
super
do that
easy.
conversion.
Not 0 Fahrenheit, I hope.
No, shoot, goodness. No. I'm kind of a fool. I was gonna put on a little space heater about an hour ago, and well, anyways. So I always advocate to try to make your spoon blank as close as possible with your fro and your axe as before you even start kind of more carving the spoon, before you leave your template. Like the thinner, the more to the size you can make your billet from the start without, you know, getting into actual carving, the easier it's going to be, the less waste you're going to have, the more spoons you're going to be able to get out of one log or branch or whatever you're kind of using. It's just more efficient that way. So I'm going to go ahead and square the ends off of this spoon here, or off of this blank here. And since this spoon actually has a nice flat square kind of tip of the bowl on it, if you make your original cut square and plumb, it'll kind of assist you all the way through the whole process. And the whole process for me really does revolve around having a nice flat surface on at least 2 sides of your spoon. At least 2 sides of your blank, that is. And I say that because for sawing, I have a little backstop on my block here, and it comes in handy, like kind of as you just saw there. But when you're pulling on a pole saw, it's so nice to have something to back in and be able to hold that saw or hold the blank right in. You get no chatter, you get no vibration. It makes it really nice and smooth. Yeah, that's kind of that. This spoon is only, I think it's just over 6 inches long, so it's not incredibly long, but as you can see, there's quite a bit of crank. So this wood is going to start, this block is going to start at almost 1 3/4 inches. I'm going to work the crank first. I'm going to cut the crank in first. And I'm going to go in about 2, let's see, let's actually just take the spoon that I have, that I kind of submitted for this kind of. I'm going to go right on the back of the bowl. That's about 2 1/2 inches, 2 3/4 inches back from the edge of the bowl. I'm going to make my line, kind of delineate my mark, denote my mark, I guess. And I'm going to put a substantial amount of crank in this. I generally maybe go about 1 inch down with the saw. And straight as you can get it, clean, flat. For the longest time, I actually carved spoons with one of those silky saws that have the recurve on it. I don't know if you've ever tried cutting a straight line with one that's got a recurve on it, but it's kind of it's like a 2-part process of getting the back down and then the front down. And then you gotta do like a little cleanup cut. Just saw nicely away. So that's sitting down there. I don't know how easily you can see that, but that's down there at least 1 inch.
Yeah, we can see it well.
Good.
For those of you who need to convert inches to metric in your head real quick, it's about 30 millimeters per inch. That's the way I do it. So that's a quick and easy way to do it.
That's good. You know what's funny too is well, I actually should be able to do that. All my chisels are actually in metric, so I should be good, but I don't know. I should be better at it, I should say. So that's the crank cut in. I'm gonna work the corners. I actually have my axe is a full-blown hewing hatchet, so it is only a single bevel axe. I only have a bevel on one side. It's perfectly flat on the other side. Really nice for truing surfaces and getting clean surfaces, but it's not very good for curving surfaces. So I work my triangles as best I can. And I think that's why I like this spoon for me, is because it works best for the tools that I have. And I'm a big advocate for the tools you have are going to shape your designs. I know a lot of people that do a lot of draw knife work, a lot of people that do spoon mill work. They can do a lot of big cooking spoons, nice flat surfaces, this, that, and the other. A lot of people that have these really nice bearded axes and all that, they can get into these nice tight curves. But for me, triangles are my friend. They should be yours. Use them. They're absolutely wonderful. Basically, I'm going to take my corners off. So I'm going to make a triangle mark from here, kind of coming up, a triangle here. And if I were to flip the blank on the side, from the bottom of that saw cut all the way till they meet, right? So we're just going to take that triangle chip out. And we're only going to come up, I don't know, three quarters of the way up on that, right? So this wood split, I haven't even used it much. But I'm going to go until my axe basically doesn't feel resistance on the cut, and then I'm going to pop it out. So I'll lever out. So I'll go until, okay, stop kind of feeling cut, lever out. Same thing on the other side. If I hit the camera with an axe chip, I'm sorry, it's not happening.
You get bonus points if you do that.
Yeah, right. Who's my target? So then that's you get your sides out. Get your sides out. And you're gonna just take out the middle. You can do it one of two ways if you don't feel comfortable holding the axe or holding the blank straight up and down. I have the ability, since I do have a nice flat hewing axe, I can actually go from the side. But I'll do that in a second. I'll bulk it out mostly with coming down from the top. Again, I'm always trying to make sure my axe is biting in the wood. I don't want a glancing blow ever, really. But especially when you're coming down from the top of the handle into the bowl, whether it be for the crank cut or even for the neck cut. All intent and purposes, that's probably flat enough for me. I'm actually going to come to the side here so I can kind of show you this. But I'll actually bring it down this angle and making sure my axe is always dropping into the corner of this. I do have this little notch cut out when I usually work. Normally I can get it in there. I don't have a lot of beard on this axe, so having this allows me to get kind of a little bit farther down with keeping a bearing surface on the block. So we'll kind of do that. Making sure my axe is dropping nice and plumb, giving a nice flat surface to work from. Just get a little chip left in there, no worries. So that's your handle down from the top of the handle down to the bottom of the crank there. So now here's my other flat reference face. I have another square surface to lay this flat on here. I did true up my block recently, so it's a little slippery, but it's nice and flat. I did it all for you guys, so I hope you appreciate that. Anyways, I see a lot of people when they do this, when they try and take the bowl, they start way back here, right? And they try and take this whole chip out at one time, and they're just sitting there hammering on it. I'm a big advocate of just taking a small bite, just taking a small little bit, working the axe straight up and down, and then just working my way back. And eventually, I'm only going to take, maybe a quarter of an inch or 6 millimeters or so off at a time until I get, basically to the end of the spoon. This is kind of a slicing motion, kind of repetitive, but it is what it is. And then continuing, just kind of keep going all the way down until you feel right at the very tip. I'm going to use actually just the tip of my axe there. And just kind of take nice, light, soft cuts, just working my way back towards. Need to go. Again, just trying to keep this axe nice and plumb. If your axe is sharp enough, this little bit of fuzz or fiddliness can kind of just come out with the tip of it. And a little bit of a chip there, just kind of just a little bit extra. Clean it up the best you can. Sometimes they're stubborn. That's it. So that's that. We're gonna. It's quite cranky. It's maybe tilted a little left. Maybe we'll make it a left or a right-handed eating spoon. So you kind of roll when you roll your hand. You can kind of fall into it. So this is going to be kind of where it gets kind of strange. This is now when you draw your template on, and we'll actually go ahead and do that.
Does anyone have any questions about
Yeah,
that part?
feel free, throw them out there if you got any questions on whatever it be.
I have a quick question about the wood. Is that one of those ornamental pears, or is that like an actual pear tree pear? Do you know?
I believe it's a Bradford pear. So
Okay,
all
right.
right, yeah. We do have pear here in Colorado. It's just on the east, on the western slope. I'm on the eastern slope of Colorado here.
Okay.
So
I was just curious. We have quite a bit of that Bradford pear, and it's much paler than that. That's a nice looking piece of wood. I was just curious.
yeah, this was really low on the tree. So this was right at the base of the tree, basically. I got a couple big sticks they got some pretty cool color in them. I'm pretty excited. John, you're going to get a blank of it, whether you like it or not. So sorry for the rest of you.
One more quick question, Kyle.
Absolutely.
How thick was your billet?
My billet was about 1 3/4 inches thick.
Okay, thanks.
1 3/4 inches thick and a little over 2 inches wide. And then my crank sits down about 1 inch. So I don't know if you guys want an actual balancing spoon, but in order to make a balancing spoon, you got to have weight to sit behind the bowl, basically right at the back of the bowl, right at the keel. That's where it's going to be the heaviest, and that's where you want it. And you're going to want it, this whole section on the back of the bowl, you want it as flat as possible, and it's actually going to go from behind the crank. I know a lot of people do when they start axing out the back of the spoon. They'll take the whole thing and they'll basically just follow this whole line all the way through. This is actually going to start a little bit farther back as far as like axing up towards the handle and axing down towards the tip. It's going to start a little bit farther back than maybe you're used to, or you kind of see, but we're going to take this shape and kind of match it out there. So bottom of the crank for me is basically the back of the handle or the back of the bowl. I come up about 3/4 inch on this guy. If I were to freehand them, which I normally do, it's about 3/4 inch up from the bottom of the crank. And I know that I have a nice little flat face on one side, and I can go right now that I have this crank all set up. I'm going to have all these circles, and if I want that circle in the center, this is the nice time to just line up your circles so you can get that nice kind of ring pattern all the way through. Mark your nines or mark your center line if you like to work from the center line. Use it. They're handy to have. This spoon is basically flat on the tip. So we're going to come through and we're just going to basically take that flat, and we're just going to take the corners off of it. It does have a small taper towards the back. So we're going to work as square as we can for as long as we can. That's what I always try and do. So we're going to basically take that down to there and into there, and that's where this template will be kind of sitting. So it's basically a straight line, slight taper, maybe 3-4 mils, not really that much at all. Back into this, and this will then just curve up right into where we want it to be. Not too steep of a curve, not too shallow of a curve, nice and pleasing. I don't know what the actual radius on that is, but
We have the template on the Rise Up and Carve website if you want to print it out and use it to trace too.
Yeah, please do. I'm just gonna cheat here because I have the template as a spoon in front of me, and I'm just gonna nip off these corners right here when I get there. Pretty basic handle as well. If you go from the bottom, you're only about 2.5-3 mils from the side, maybe only 1/4 inch wide total, and at the top, we're just going to be a little bit bigger than that, maybe 5/8 of an inch or something like that. And we'll just kind of we'll draw a straight line for now The template has a small bit of curves as the spoon does, as in front of me that are used on it. And that's basically it. That'll give us our form, that'll give us our shape. We can work off of that. I'm gonna work on the handle first.
Hey
And again,
Kyle, hold the face of it up to us real quick. Yeah, thank you.
I don't know. I could have chose a nice paler wood, a little easier to see for you, but maybe you can see that better there.
It's fine.
I'm gonna take some meat off the back of the handle. Now again, I got the crank sitting here. I'm gonna actually take from back here up, because I want to leave this space behind the bowl. Pardon my pencil, it escaped. I'm gonna leave this space behind the bowl at the back of the bowl as long as I can. That'll give us weight back there, and that'll allow us to form the keel a little bit easier down the road. So we're just gonna kind of come up. We're just gonna take our triangles. We're gonna leave it about a 1/2 inch thick or so for right now, but we're gonna take our triangles. It looks like I'm wailing on my axe, it's because I am. I'm used to it. People like that. If you ever get into doing demonstrations live or carving in person for people at markets, people like, I don't know. Let me know your guys' opinion on it, but people like being heavy-handed with things. They like seeing big shavings getting plopped off and chips flying everywhere, and that's going to sit like that. You can kind of see how it kind of shapes. So it doesn't exactly follow the actual line. It sits a little bit farther behind the line. This will be our flat that'll eventually let the whole blank sit on itself like that. And then the same thing for the front of the bowl. We're basically going to take the whole back of the bowl is going to be nice and quite flat. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to kind of rough it in a little bit. Take some of that out, do some relief cuts up front and drop it back. Same thing, 1/2 inch, 3/8, plenty thick. I'll probably end up going 1/4 or so. Always kind of awkward working from one side to the other. If you can find a good reference point on the blank itself to work from, I'm a big advocate for that as well. At this point too, we can flatten everything, start maybe dropping the back of the handle down a little bit, getting that a little bit closer to a slightly finished surface. We'll come back through with a knife, it'll be much easier to sure everything up. Yeah. There we go. So that sits like that. Basic normal spoon blank. You see them a million times at this point in time. Keep things nice and square for as long as you can until you don't need it anymore, and then you can get. We're gonna cut in the neck. I do stop cuts on the handle and not the back of the neck. Soft. I used to axe them out. Sometimes I still do. But I enjoy how clean it is to just be able to work to a nice little stop cut line. You can do a bump cut, and it just, if you got good clean wood, pops right off, no issues. A couple workarounds to that. All right, so the back of the bowl here, that's our lowest point. I'm actually going to come in above that, maybe, I don't know, 1/4 inch or so. Make my marks around, just kind of give me an idea of where I'm at. And I'm going to follow this center line. I'm going to drop it directly on the back of the bowl, and then kind of tell myself, okay, don't go within, you know, 1/8 of an inch on either side of that. Otherwise you're going to cut your spoon in half. It happens. It happens, especially if you're heavy-handed or if you feel like you're not coming down square or plumb or anything like that, you know, you will. Kind of avoid that, I drop my sawing hand down in the back, but I see the front of the bowl first, or see the front of the blank first, rather, and then that kind of just helps you not overshoot the back. If you need to make any tweaks, that's kind of when you do it. You can drop your hand down a little bit in the back and just give, like, nice little soft stroke. Like where that's at, I'm actually going to. I'm gonna cut my saw to length, or cut my blank to length. Cut my length now.
That's a nice tip that I never thought of, where you're using the edge of your block to make sure you cut a nice straighten out line. That never occurred to me to do that. That's a great idea.
Oh yeah, I use this basically as a saw guide.
That's great. I never thought of that. That's fantastic. I've been doing this a long time, and that never even occurred to me. So thank you for that tip.
I think that's something that just kind of has evolved from, I guess, other woodworking bench, like working at the bench with a bench hook or something like that. Kind of, that's where all these kind of fun woodworking things overlap. Like when I really got into spoon carving when I was in between projects or in between jobs, and I just wanted something quick. I wanted something while the kid was sleeping. I wanted something while the wife was just chilling, or we could hang out and she'd read a book and I could just carve and whittle. But the two disciplines are totally different, but they're also one and the same. I don't know if any of you guys are woodworkers out there as well that do have furniture making, joinery, cabinetry, that kind of sort of. But you learn a lot from seeing what you do at the bench. It's also kind of what you do at the axe block, and vice versa. Like there are times now where I will be at my bench and I'll be like, where's my axe? I don't really want to rip this whole board down the side. I'd rather just hew it off and work it that way.
Yep.
So I'm a big advocate for it. It's it is Sloyd. Like the world of Sloyd. I think, Sloyd is a teaching mechanism. It's a way to learn with your hands. And spoon carving it's funny. I don't know how many have looked at the book of Sloyd, but spoon carving is pretty early on in that book, or in that realm. It starts out with like hand planing a board, cutting a board, making a cutting board, doing a butter knife, making a spoon, and then you dive into the rest of this stuff.
Yep.
We've made spoon carving quite complicated, I think, but our ancestors also had some really awesome spoons that I don't think we are there. Anyways,
I find myself reaching for my Sloyd knife all the time to do things like mark an angle or chamfer an edge or widen a hole, like things that traditional woodworking would teach me. I need a jig and a router and 2 hours to do. I'll just do with my Sloyd knife, and if it's a little rough, I don't care. I'm making shelf. Like
yeah, absolutely. I do all my chamfers with my Sloyd knife. I think it's just you're used to having it in your hand. You can see where the bevel is. You're not guessing angles, this, that, and the other. You find the errors and you pull it off, and like you're like, oh my gosh, that was so much easier. Why haven't I not been doing that? Yeah, simple things like that. Also, just seeing form, being able to see a three-dimensional shape. You get back to like a flat piece of woodwork and you're like, oh my god, this is the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life. So yeah, we got the crank cut in, we got our neck cut in. I'm gonna actually go ahead and from where my knife cut is, or even kind of where the back with my saw cut, from the back of the bowl, I'm just gonna taper that down to the top of the handle. Just relieve some of this mass on the side. It'll actually help splitting out as well. I got a cool bark inclusion. We'll see if it affects the spoon.
Have you ever found that using such a heavy axe is a little bit limiting, or you pretty much have always used the heavy axe? Because I when I switched to a lighter axe, I found I got better at curves and stuff when I switched to a smaller axe.
Well, let's see here.
Sorry to keep interrupting.
No, you're good. I love that. That's actually a question I get. So I have the old Robin Wood, one of his originals, from I don't know when his first couple batches of these came out, what, 5-6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago almost. And I started with this and it was fine, and now when I come back to it, it feels like it's 4.5 ounces.
Okay.
I think this axe, it's quite heavy. It's probably 2.5 pounds or so, maybe almost 3. the mass is limiting and accelerating at the same time. So yeah, I mean, it's not an ideal setup, right? It's a single bevel axe, it's heavy, but I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't the Grand Force, aren't the carving axes slightly, you can get a right and a left-handed, so I'd assume that the bevel is more heavily on one side than the other.
Yeah,
So
they sell them all three. They sell them all three ways. There's a right, left, and a center bevel. So
yeah, so it's a glorified hewing axe.
Yeah.
With a tiny little bit of a back bevel on one side. I mean, this has a slight convex. Yeah, convexity. Concave, you go in the cave. Convex, you come out of the cave. I don't know. Yeah, so that's why I work my triangles as much as I do, and I work the way I do is because I think this axe it shows me, okay, just cut a straight line. Okay, sweet, you did that really well. Now just tune that in. So we got that kind of do. I'm gonna take a little bit of relief off this side. This is all gonna go away anyways, but the more I can take off right now, is gonna help that bump cut or that split out be more predictable. And you can, even if you really feel comfortable with it, and you can just kind of come in from the top and split this out, just kind of really gently. And again, I'm making sure this axe is always block kind of beat in a little bit. It's always biting in the wood. Like this is when you absolutely don't want a glancing blow, right? You'll split the whole spoon out. I really need to do something about this block. But we'll keep kind of going on it. The same thing here, I'm gonna go until I feel that the axe just loses resistance a little bit and then kind of pull out. I don't really want to be blowing this out at this stage, but this wood is actually splitting quite nicely. So I can almost go into the top. I know I'm right next to my fingers, but kind of the way it goes with this. Sometimes the wood, sometimes it's just sticky right here. And that's it. I might not go too much further on that, just so I can just safely not blow my bowl out. I'm no Adam Hawker. I wish I could be. That guy's an absolute legend with an axe, but get as close as you comfortably can. So judging from that side, this stuff split out pretty well. I'm gonna go in quite from the top and just bumps down, get it there. Okay, and we're kind of getting there. Same thing here. If you're having issues with kind of your block sliding, just go ahead and knock the corners off. Give yourself a little bit of a reference or a little bit of a bearing surface to work off of. I'm only picking my axe up here, you know, an inch, 2 inches at a time. I'm trying to really make sure it's not coming above my thumbs, not coming above my knuckles. And I'm just gonna work right down into the bottom of that saw cut. And stop when you get there and come back up. Back up. That's probably good there for now. It's a good little bit of ways, but little slicing cuts too really help you out. Using the tip of the axe. That's a sticky one. Any questions from anyone? That's that. All this will come out with a knife relatively quickly. I'm gonna take a little bit of weight off the back here, just kind of give her a little bit of.
I find that on these videos, everything looks thicker than it really is. When you're done with that axe cut there, can you measure how thick the blank is at the bottom of the bowl right now?
Yeah, so at the bottom of the bowl, this really isn't that thick. It's It's maybe only a ½ inch or so.
Okay. Because a lot of
Uh,
times, I don't, maybe it's just my eyes, but whenever I'm looking at something on Zoom or a YouTube video, it looks way thicker than it really is. And I don't know if it's a proportion thing or what, but that looks like it's about 3/4 of an inch thick though. And you said it's only a half, so.
Yeah, no, that always blows my mind too. Is like, or I'll watch like, you know, I'll watch one of Zed's videos and I'll watch someone carve, and they'll be like, man, that is so thick. Why are you leaving it that thick? You're gonna give yourself so much of a headache, and then you look at it and you're like, oh, that's not bad at all. So because on this spoon I was able to, or I take the bottom of the crank is right at the back of the bowl, coincidentally right at where the radius starts. I can use that as a reference point for when I'm axing out from the backside and you can't see anything. Instead of drawing a line on there, I can just say, okay, don't axe past the crank. Stay behind the crank. So like for this instance, you'll be able to see what I'm doing, but I can't see what I'm doing. Right. So I'm not going to come past this point. I'll just kind of stay back here. Work with the tip of the axe if you want to come in nice and close. Confidently. Good confident axe strokes is what you want right there. Gonna come in on the side as well. And if you're a little heavy-handed too, it doesn't really hurt as long as you got a little bit of, as long as you got some width back here, it's okay to be a little heavy-handed because that's just going to relieve those fibers out. Anywho, when you get down to the knife work, I'll kind of come through and clean this up just a touch. A little bit thick there. Just little small bump cuts. So this is kind of where this axe is slightly limiting, right? So I basically am limiting myself to being able to straight cut or just working with the tip. I'm used to it. I'll do a little set of green.
And I would add, for anybody who's new, that's the danger zone right there for splitting the bowl in half. So, you know, he's knows what he's doing, but that if you bump the back of the bowl there too hard, you can easily create a little crack in the whole thing.
Yeah. So, and that's usually why I leave. That's why I come back up a little bit on my saw cuts. Usually, is so that when I leave the back of the bowl square until I get the handle down. That way, if I do come through and I grab a little bit of end grain, I give myself like a 1/4 inch of leeway just in case I do slip or something happens. And then sometimes you are able to chase it out, and you don't necessarily have to abandon all hope. So I kind of like where this is at. So we got a kind of a heavy keel back behind the bowl here. The handle's coming up. We're gonna go ahead and just kind of square off this bowl, or we'll kind of get our taper or side profile or top profile in, I guess you would call it. But again, I'm using this axe to my advantage on this design, and I'm only working in one direction. I'm not coming through multiple directions, and I'm just going to be able to take this all the way from the tip of the bowl all the way to the back of the bowl. And I'm liking where that's at. This one might be a little bit longer than the template, but that's fine with me. We're going to go ahead and knock these corners off up front. Kind of keep going around, just chasing this template line or chasing that. I left that little tip there when I axe from one side, otherwise you're going to come to this other side and you're going to blow it out. Kind of work towards one central point, or always work towards the center. Work towards the center on your end grain. It'll help you out. A little bit thick in the back. We'll kind of, again, just kind of work this out, take it down. Same thing with the bowl. And again, I want this bowl, the back of this bowl, as flat as possible for as long as I can. Meaning, I want this bowl going in one direction, one grain direction, almost the whole way from the back of the bowl all the way down to the front. Adding a little bit of shape, adding a little bit of curvature to it. something like that. I like where the back's at. Maybe we'll even come off a little bit on the side. Get a little bit heavy. Right, so that's basically it. The axe is basically done. I won't be using this thing anymore, so we'll just go ahead and put that away. Some of you guys might be a little more proficient with it, might feel a little bit better with it. Go take your axe as far as you want to go. Utilize that tool as much as you can. It is the most efficient tool outside of a furrow and a wedge, basically, that you can use. Get as far as you can with it. It'll help your hands. It'll help your knife work down the road. What am I looking for? My knife. Aha. Strap up, sharpen up.
Yeah, the more axe work you do, the better it is for your hands, for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're a draw knife person, same thing. I know some folks are big draw knife people, and that'll save so much wear and tear on your hands, especially as you get a little bit older. Not that I know anything about that, but
Oh yeah, no, it's a thing. All right, so we're gonna work this profile down. We're gonna get everything nice and flat and where we want it. I'm gonna take off some of the bevels on the back of the bowl. Just working from one side to the other. I'm just gonna do this just to relieve some of the waste. Release some of the weight.
we have to do this like a fashion show. Whose knife are you using?
Oh, this is just an old school Mora, man.
Okay, there we go.
This year I'm waiting for Mr. Whitehead to restock his store and send out that email, and I'm gonna jump on one of those big 100 mil laser sloids that he makes or whatever they are. Yeah, maybe I'll upgrade this year. But this thing's been trusty. I tell you what, these old 106s they're great.
Yeah.
Put my own handle on it, and I like a longer handle. I'll say that. I like being able to just have that ability to, if you need whatever's.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get this bowl set up. I go at about a 45-degree angle. Well, no, that's a little too steep. About 30-degree angle on these edges. And I'm kind of curving my knife down. I want to get the bottom of the bowl about as good as I can. It's nice and clean, and the bottom of the bowl at the back of the bowl. And then so this is always kind of interesting to me. I don't understand how it works, but I'm carving uphill but downhill at the same time. So I'm carving in a round as I'm carving up the hill. So you're able to kind of come up with it. If you use just the tip, or if you use the whole thing, you can actually come down and swoop up and kind of come. Especially if you angle and pitch your knife a little bit more aggressive on an angle, you can kind of actually come up the back of the bowl like that.
I
the
teach
Baltimore
this.
cut.
I was gonna say, thanks, Phil. I didn't know you were here. What up, Phil? I teach this technique a lot, and I talk about how the grain runs in 3 dimensions. And if rather than think about the direction of the grain, you think about where you're pushing with your knife is pushing into wood. If there's meat under where you're pushing, you'll be fine. You won't tear out.
Correct. I'm a big advocate for that too as well, and that's actually a good point. You bring that up because when we get to the crank, or when we get to the heel of this spoon, on the keel of that's actually one of those things where it kind of gets silly because you're working across the grain. You think you'd be working uphill, but technically you're working downhill, and as you come down the handle, you're going to be working down a triangle while coming up the grain on the, it's one of those things. But yeah, you're coming in around rather than coming up.
Right. As long as you're pushing into wood, then your cut will be supported by wood underneath of it, and you'll slice instead of like lift up the fibers.
Right. And that's one of those things. That's really hard for especially new people to understand until they do it a few times, because it just doesn't, until you can feel that grain change and direction change. It's sort of hard to explain.
That technique was taught to me by Jojo Wood and Don Nalizetti independently, and I didn't understand it for like 3 months. Like, they taught it to me, and then one day I was in my shop like 3 months later, and I was doing it, and I went, "Oh, if I come around, oh!" And it all kind of sunk in.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you gotta touch a knife to wood to be able to like see it, and it's kind of scary. You're like, "There's no way this is gonna work. It's just gonna blow out," and then you're like, And if you're scared about it, just put a little more angle on everything.
Yeah,
And go a
bevel your
little
knife.
slower.
Right, bevel your knife up and
Yep.
come in more at an angle and always be slicing.
Absolutely. So then speaking of bevels, I'm going to do the top profile. So I'm okay with where this is at. Now I can go ahead, if I wanted to take the back off, I can go and work my way down to those bevels. Right, so now we got those bevels kind of cut in. I can work my knife down into that. And this is actually almost thick enough that I'm actually going to go back and touch it with my axe. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to come back to it. It's a freaking sweet tool, especially if they're sharp. So now I'm down. I'm down to where I want to be as far as thickness on the side of the bowl. We're in that realm of we can get there very comfortably with a knife. This is the awkward one. But now that I know that all this grain from the back of the bowl down to the tip is running in that same direction, I can actually take my knife and my axe and drop it right here. That looks really freaky on camera. Doesn't look that way from where I'm at, but I can take that corner off right there. And since I'm now working back up the grain, I'm actually continuing to work down the grain. We'll probably call that good for now. All right, I'm gonna put the axe away.
We've heard that before.
Yeah, that's good for that.
Well, I just wanted to point out too, like, you know, for me, I always end up carving really deep bowls, and I think I have to kind of force myself to carve shallower bowls and to realize, yeah, like that you don't need a lot of thickness in the bowl to carve a bowl that is fine for eating. And that, in fact, better for eating sometimes when they're more shallow.
Better for eating. So wood itself too has like a lot more surface tension than metal. So like if you were to you can put the same amount of soup or liquid on a flat spoon that you could in a metal spoon that's got more concavity.
I never thought of that before. That's a really funny way to think about eating.
Yeah, so that's one thing I always noticed is like, holy crap, I can fit, and it sticks to the bowl much better, right? So you don't need it. Like, it's not sliced, it's not slopping off the wooden spoon as easily.
It's a great observation.
Maybe that's the rise up and carve YouTube video that'll go wide, is how to eat with a wooden spoon, because that's the hardest part, is getting people to even think about eating. They look at it like, why would I eat with that? That's not right.
Right. So like that's like the hardest part too about like selling eating spoons at markets, is like people are like, oh, what do you do with that? I'm like, well, it's a spoon. You could do whatever you want with it though, really, right?
I use it to shove food in my mouth.
Yeah, exactly. But then I have to show them, like I carry a little spoon in my pocket and I'd be like, hey, look, this is my spoon. This is what I eat. I'm the guy that goes to Chipotle and eats his, his leftovers at work like a weirdo. But yeah, I think the definite trick with it is, I think people have like a fear, right? So when they were a kid or at some point in time, a doctor put like one of those tongue dispensers down on their mouth and it was rough and it tasted gross and it was weird and thick, and or like the ice cream tasting spoons that they give you. People are like, oh,
we've developed a belief that if it's not plastic or metal and it can't be sterilized in a dishwasher with heat and soap, that it's not safe. I mean, I feel like 5-10 years ago, if something dropped on the floor, it went right back into the dishwasher or went right back into the washing machine. Like we think unless soap has touched it and hot water right before I use it, it's covered in dangerous bacteria.
Right.
So people think wood is going to be, so people have that fear of wood.
Yeah, they do. But you want to make it so that people aren't weirded out by it. So when they put it in their mouth, they're like, no, this is a comfortable eating device. You want it to be flat on the bottom of their tongue. You don't want to be too wide so that they're opening their mouth like some glutton out there that's trying to just absolutely get in there with it. You want it to be nice and comfortable, nice and flat, not a lot of, these are pretty shallow. All these spoons that I carve, they're really, I mean, this one, they're shallow and they're really thin, you know, this is, that's, there's hardly any concavity in that bowl at all. It's basically just enough to give it some surface.
Are you going after the
Kyle-
triangles again there, Kyle?
Yeah.
So this
Right.
is one thing I'm gonna do, and this is one thing I really love. I like working off of like reference surfaces. So I've got this kind of blanked out. I just took this front, I just kind of beveled that off. That's gonna kind of denote where the surface of that bowl is, kind of just shaped out the top a little bit. You can knock these corners off now. I usually just wait a little bit.
Yeah, I
There's
like
a
that.
really
Like you
interesting
go
German-
around. You go around that bowl. That you have that 30-degree angle, right? So it's almost you're getting your lines to come all the way around the bowl up into the handle.
Correct.
You know, and
so-
then you.
Go ahead.
Like.
What were you gonna say, Phil?
There's a really interesting German that comes on Rise Up called Georg that talks about them as helper facets, and I think that's a really
Helper
good
facets.
description.
Yes,
Really
I
good
love that.
description.
So
I
then
love it
here's,
too.
so then
Phil.
I'll take that to another level. I do helper facets when I'm roughing in the side profile here. I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see that. I'll do it on this other side to show you. I have my lines drawn out on the spoon, on the handle here. I'm gonna come in at a 45 and I'm gonna follow that down to where I want it and where I like the way it looks. Take a little bit of that out, and that's going to give me like these that's going to give me these two angles right there, right? So that way when I'm looking at the back of the spoon, if I'm carving down this, all I know is that I'm just carving until I remove that bevel, until I come to a sharp eris, and then I know that I'm down to the width on the side that I want to be. Right, so I'm kind of getting there. I know I'm getting there, but I'm not quite there. Just kind of keep working back. Kind of real. I don't know how green this lumber is. It's not too green, but it's not too dry. I think this tree had a bit of sickness in it. But I mean, you don't want to be going and cutting down live, nice healthy trees for no reason, just to make some silly spoons. Unless if you want to, but so there, yeah, you see that now. So I took that bevel, there you can see that in the light a little better. This bevel is my reference face for when I'm working from a side that I can't see that line. So that way I'm not having to flip this over back and forth. I can just go until I feel a sharp corner and I know that I'm there.
Such a great trick. Such a great use.
And then I'll just kind of take this back edge off a little bit. I don't like it too sharp. I don't like it too robust, too round. Same thing here. I'll be able to see this one a little better. I can actually see my line, and this is I love. This is my favorite knife grip of all. It's just like pulling into my chest. I think this kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier too, about having like this here. I like having stability. Like the more stable you can be, the better in anything. So there we go. I kept everything kind of nice and square. Just kind of lock in that profile, just kind of the way everyone kind of like talks about. I still have all this weight back here. And as of right now, this spoon just about balances as is. We can take a little bit of weight off of that. Now we can kind of shape like the side profile a little bit more on this handle and kind of come down. Same thing with doing little bevels. I'm going to do some bevel work down in and kind of really get that kind of accentuated feathered pattern that you see on Mr. Barnaby Carter. So we're going to kind of just keep going that, do the other same, match it. And we're going to give a little bit of a concave. I say we, I really mean me. This is my demonstration for you, but
when we carve it, maybe we'll do the same thing.
I like to think I like to think of myself as participating with the tree and the knife. But if you want to be all selfish about it, whatever, it's cool.
Yeah, okay.
If it's all about you, I guess,
yeah.
Just kidding,
There was
of course.
I don't know if you guys are on Instagram, if you guys follow that Don Hewley guy, the guy that does the word of the day. He's got like a perfectly awesome what do you call that kind of voice, like a commentator voice, or like someone you'd hear for like a perfect commercial, or that would seduce you into about anything.
Nice. That's how I think of I can't remember his name right now. The joiner from Plymouth, Massachusetts. What's his name? I know everybody knows him.
Oh my God,
Peter Follansbee has a voice,
Yes.
right? He could read the back of a pillbox. He could read the ingredients, and it would sound like a children's story.
This is gonna sound really weird, but if I am ever in need of sleep, I will listen to Peter Follansbee and stay awake.
Oh, that's what?
That's how good his voice is. Plus, I think he's my favorite woodworker in period.
Yeah, totally. And he's responsible for me getting into this.
I like to take this top out. So what I did there is I just kind of took some of this belly out of this. So now we have like kind of like a little bit of a flow. Did I do it on this spoon? I did do it on this spoon. So on the original spoon, I just took a little bit out, just right in here. I think that just gives it a little bit more flow, gives a little more shape to it, aesthetically and all that. So I think we're there. I'm going to do a little bit of initial hollowing on the bowl here. So is this where everyone kind of like sits there and talks about and shows off? Now it's like fashion time. So this is my little knife. I use the Jason Lonin knives. Great guy, great company, does cool stuff. I have a lot of his tools. Somewhat readily available, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
These first cuts, when you're kind of shaping the bowl, I always find to be the hardest and awkward because you're leveling a surface out. They're more like planing cuts, like a scrub plane would, rather than smoothing and hollowing a bowl. So I tend to use the tip a little bit more to really kind of get down quicker. And you can go fairly aggressive right now because we're trying to get down to this bevel on the side. And again, starting all the way at the front, working all the way back. Making sure to take out more of the middle than from the sides, going evenly on all sides. And the nice part about having these nice long bold spoons is you can work from one side like you would like a hand plane or a draw knife. You're basically just working one direction in a long way. So you're not having to come in on the front of the bowl and work around, come in the other side of the front of the bowl, work around. You're just working this one plane all the way down. Makes it really makes it very nice. I mean, I think that hollowing the bowl of the spoon is like the quintessential spoon carving thing, right? Like if you were to say, oh, like if someone were to say spoon carver, like the first thing that usually comes to my mind is like one of those little ASMR videos of someone like sitting there.
Yep.
But yeah, we're just gonna kind of keep working it down. I'll kind of go a little quicker here.
I don't know if it's just me, maybe because I'm left-handed, maybe because of the way I learned how to carve, but the cut you're doing right now is the most awkward cut in the world to me. I almost never do that. I'm a side-to-side bowl carver.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if that's just me. Is there other people here who agree with me? Let's take a survey. Is that a good cut for everybody else and it's just me?
Doing that cut he's doing there is super dependent on where you put the tip of the handle. So he's resting the handle up against his chest. You can't do that. You can't do that cut otherwise.
Yeah.
It's
super.
Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I have
it's a lot of force. You're putting a lot of force into this, you know. And then, well, especially if I am at least. I do go side to side. I enjoy it, but see, so now once we have this surface basically kind of like situated kind of where we want it, and now we like plane that surface down to the shape, the concavity that we like. Now I'll actually come across the grain, because it'll be a lot easier to get there. If you're just going, going across a grain from like a straight point while you're kind of just hollowing, it's more efficient. Go across the grain anytime you can. Wood will come out much easier. This wood's actually quite tough. I probably should have chose a softer, maybe easier wood to work. It's okay.
And then to do that cut, the opposite one, I usually rest the tail of the spoon on the block. I kind of anchor it there.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I see how you're cradling it in your non-cutting hand. That's cool.
So that's also
those
one
cuts.
of the
Those cuts that come downhill towards the center, the ones Ron's saying he doesn't like, are awesome because you can use the grip strength from your non-cutting hand to squeeze and to help out. You get a lot of power.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll have to practice that some more, I guess, because I've never gotten a hang of that one.
Yeah, I'm a lefty like Ron as well, and I do the cross grain most of the time, but when I've got to pull it, I'll pull it in toward myself, and I use a right and a left-handed knife. Switch hands and do it that way, and I've kind of taught myself to do that.
Is that Bill? What's up, Bill?
Yeah, how you doing? Hi, Kevin.
Doing great.
That's
Bill,
a suggestion.
I do have a right and a left knife. I also have a nice old Gary Hackett scorp when he was making scorps back in the day. I know he still makes them, but probably makes more of them than ever, actually.
I tend to do that a lot, especially when there's still a lot of meat in the spoon. I come down towards the center from one direction, down towards the center from the other direction, flipping the spoon around, and then I carve across the grain to kind of clean it up. I'm left with all these like hairy, long, like that.
There.
Right.
Just come in right at the bottom. And you can only really do that if you have the back of the bowl here relieved enough for the tip of the knife to work in it. So that's another part of like spoon carving too, is the spoon knife you use will shape the bowl that you design. I don't know if did I say that right, but basically, so the back of this bowl, it can only have so much sweep in it because this knife only has so much sweep in it. If that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. That's a good explanation. And maybe that's part of why I do it the way that I do it, is just because the knives and just the way that I've always done it. And I have a tendency to make much narrower spoons than you do too with eating spoons. So that might be part of why I don't do the down one also, or it may just be habit. I don't know.
I totally
narrower as in like as in width this way.
Yeah. I make my spoons look a little bit more like metal eating spoons, I guess. So it's a different cut, I suppose. And I'm like Kate said, I tend to cut them a little bit deeper than you do also. So
yeah, I mean, by the time I'm done with hollowing this out, it'll be fairly flat. That's kind of awkward for me to show that. So when you're talking about cross grain, this is how I anchor it. I anchor it into my hip, and that way I can actually just kind of come up and swoop, and I can put pressure into my body. And I think that's
a cool one when you don't have a block.
When you don't have a block, I mean, and you'll find this too, if you're carving at markets or in front of people, I think like sitting down and carving, it just like, it's cool and all, but I think that's like, it's harder for people to see when they're standing up across like an aisleway or something like that. So like if you're standing up here and doing it, they're like, oh, well, you can come over and watch. So
yeah, I could see that being a good grip, like you're talking to customers with all your spoons in front of you and you're still carving.
Yeah, that's right. So you don't have to like, I mean, I bring my little stool for me when I mean, some cuts are just way safer sitting down. I totally 100% say it's way safer to sit down and carve than it is to stand up. I'm just used to it. So you just kind of find your way around it. I mean, so all intended purposes, like that's pretty blanked out, and that's not very deep. It's really just deeper in the back than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good because, I mean, I think sometimes the bowl can be intimidating for carvers. Like, oh, I have to get through this whole thing, but it's really actually not that much in this particular spoon.
Right. So if I were to take my knife, the back of my knife, which I know is flat, and see if you can see this. I don't know if you can see that, but that's only that's not very deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's only maybe what 2-3 mils at most.
Yeah.
Because
Barely
anything
quarter.
more, you're like, holy crap, how am I
Right.
supposed to get my teeth in there? I got to dig it out. Sorry, coffee break.
That would be a good spoon for eating lots of meals that would, in the modern world, people eat with a fork.
So that's another thing too, is people eat off plates more than they eat out of bowls.
Yeah.
And a flatter shovel type spoon like this benefits. I mean, you can eat out of a bowl with them, but it does lend itself much better for a plate.
Yeah,
You can
100%.
You can just sit there, swoop it off. So we're gonna kind of get to this back. So sitting there, it's pretty cranky. It's kind of looking like we need it to. Get as far as you can before you have to. So, okay, back to this. I know I just put my spoon knife down, but I'm back. I'm back again. I know you guys can't trust me. But is that not how spoon carving is? I don't know a single person that carves one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Very
It is.
few. There's
I
very
mean, you
few.
have to adjust. You have to be flexible.
Yep, because as soon as you turn the bowl over, you're going to say, "Oh no, that's not right." Or you're going to flip it over and be like, "Well, that's not going to work." Or you see a corner, you see an edge, something's not parallel, something's not square.
I can think of one or two people that have made it their like mission to perfect their process, and they do one step and then they're done that step and they don't come back to it. But it's almost like that has to be the thing that you love about spoon carving, to be that type of carver.
Yeah, so like Dawson Moore.
I'm thinking of Rachel Banton. She's, in my mind, she's the ultimate process carver. She
Emmett does too.
has all her steps down.
I knew that's who you were thinking.
Yeah.
Everyone's told me of this elusive Rachel, but I have not seen.
Oh man, we made a video together where she was teaching me how to carve a spoon, and I followed her process, and the spoon came out so great, and it was so easy and fast. And I was like, if I did this all the time, but then I don't. But then that's not how I work. That's not how my brain works.
Yeah, so I usually make this spoon. If I'm not talking, I will axe it out and I'll have it down to this stage in probably, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes. And then I usually sell my spoons for about $30. So if I can get more than $10 an hour out of the spoon, big money. So we're going to shape this back. And so this is kind of going back to what we talked about earlier about relieving wood, or kind of cutting into wood, cutting downhill, cutting into grain, kind of that sort of stuff. So this is going to be another one of those cuts where it's kind of like you're coming into wood, but you're also going downhill, but you're coming up into hill, you're also going downhill. It's very awkward. We're going to start from the back corner of this bowl, and we're going to actually cut. If I were to draw a line down the back of this handle, right down the back, right in the middle, kind of just to show you, we're going to leave that line there as long as we can through the entire process. And we're basically just going to work to that line. So I'm going to take this knife, and I'm going to my straight knife here, and I'm going to come in across the grain and up until we get to that point. I'm not going to take that line. I'm going to leave as much weight in the middle of that spoon as I can. And what this is slowly getting me to that point where a lot of people, when they come to this cut and they come in and you got to turn it around, this will get you so far into that eventually you're not coming across the grain anymore. You're kind of coming down the slope. But we need to relieve this back portion of this. So this whole back portion is going to be a triangle. So we're going to get rid of all this wood parallel to that line. Little chest lever cut here always is an absolute.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite grip. I could carve a whole spoon with chest lever.
Yeah, so I went a little over the line there, but a little discrepancy is fine. So then I'm going to keep, I don't know if you can see this very well, but we're still coming basically across the grain. until we match the angle of the crank, until we match this angle right here. So we're kind of coming in up. So now it may seem like we're now kind of carving up the hill, like as we're carving up the handle, but we're carving down this, we're carving down the triangle. We're still kind of carving against, kind of across the grain, but now we're working our way slightly back towards. But now there's nothing in front of my knife to dig in and dive into. So I can freely come in and let my knife just rotate out. And I'm not catching any alternating switching or upwards or oops. So it's just kind of that happens. That's the only problem with this thumb grip is if your thumb slips, your hand is so strong that you don't want to like jerk back.
That's where
or like same thing, like if you're doing like some of these little cuts around the edge and it kind of slips through, it's so easy for you to be so strong with the knife that it comes through and it pops over on you. So for that, I just say, take your time, be confident, make sure you finish the cut that you start and see the knife all the way through the motion. And we're slowly getting there, right? Come over and flip this other side. Same thing, just working across the grain. This is kind of awkward because the tip of the knife will eventually get to this point where it's digging in here. So once it starts doing that, we'll actually switch over, put it in our chest, and rotate from that in across the grain. Watch your thumb, watch my thumb. Make sure it doesn't stay in the way. We're gonna do a little bit of assisted pull here, and we're gonna try and match the back of the bowl across the grain, slowly working back into the handle. And so now I'm getting to this point where this crank here is, and I'm not having to come in and I'm not having to come up. I'm just going across the grain into that. I don't know which side's easier for you to see. Is it this side? But I'm going across, basically across the grain up into that peak, into the peak of the triangle, which is downhill. I think the only really way you can get a real keel on these types of spoons is if you have enough crank. You won't be able to get this easy as this, with a flat spoon, in my opinion. Because of the way the knife has to come and exit out of the cut. Right, so if it's coming here and it has something to exit out of, if you're going on, if your spoon's flat, you still got wood right here. You're still coming into wood, and you'll have to end up taking that whole handle off. Whereas this, it leaves me enough room to come in, come up at that peak, and leave. So that's getting there. So we're pretty close. This is always kind of awkward because your fingers are kind of like behind the blade, but like I said a minute ago, see your cuts all the way through. Finish the cut you start. And you can work your way back if you want to do, you know, sequential facets, make it look nice. You can do 3, 4, 5, however many feels good. It's kind of awkward there, but again, we're going across the grain with the knife biased at an angle and working our way back up. And you're going to get to a point where some of this might be in the way a little bit. We'll work all that down. Again, keeping that center line on the back of that spoon right there. And we're just relieving wood behind the cut. So that way when we take that chip out, the knife can freely just come out of it. All right, so now we're kind of there. We're at the point where I'm almost to the point where I could come back here and take a little bit of this keel off, maybe, probably right around there, depending on how much you want to take off. And we'll take off that peak. Don't be afraid to be aggressive. Take wood off as fast as you need to. Or if you want to enjoy the process, take it off slowly and methodically. But basically, same thing here as with the axe. I'm going to take one arrow off from triangle, switch it over, take the other arrows off, take the flat off in the middle. I'm going to work my way up that side, this side, middle, left, right. It's kind of cool, you know, you can get those fun patterns. And then you just obliterate it right away. You're like, oh, that's cool. All right, get rid of it.
Yeah.
And go until you feel like you have. I'll go until I feel like I have a nice taper from back to forward. And I'll end up actually kind of swoop the back end a little bit up, like a little bit more towards the top. So you get a little more of a swooping action up towards the top of the blade or the handle. Match your facets. Sounds like I'm exerting a lot of force. It's because I am. And so, you know, that's a lot of keel. You can keep that if you want, or you can take it out. I usually don't like it too heavy, so I'll take it out a little bit. And same thing, since I had enough crank on this spoon, I don't have to worry about this spoon digging in. I have enough space for it to rotate in, up, rotating my hand as I go through and actually flattening. On this cut, I'd be flattening so that the tip doesn't dive in. And on this cut, I'd be flattening as well so the tip falls over. Little push cuts there. If you want to kind of rotate or round over this just a touch. I like to. I think it makes it easier to feel. Yeah, so that's pretty much where we're at now. Now in the front, I like it a little bit thinner, so I'm gonna just kind of take some bevels off the side, round over the front, round over the side, round over the sides. Watch your thumbs. Don't cut yourself. Be mindful of your actions. Know where the point of the spoon or the point of the handle, point to the blade, point to the handle.
Point of the handle.
What's the point, right? So, but yes, and this is just kind of one of those things where you can take as much time as you want. You can put the fastest in where you want them, and we're just kind of going to work our way smoothly into where we feel like we're comfortable. And we've kind of gotten rid of all square lines, or so all square feeling lines. And here I got a really sharp knife, so I am able to kind of come up into that neck transition quite easily. But again, same thing on this back side. I'm working towards the middle of the spoon, or the middle of the handle, and rotating as I kind of come up and through, getting a little bit of softening the edges. I tend not to do super ornate spoons, just because I think when people look at it and they go, "Oh, I'll never use it," I want to be able to make a spoon that people might use. I say might. I don't care what they use it or if they buy it at all, but I want to show them that it's a viable option for something to use and that people use them for thousands of years. So we'll go ahead and just chase a couple bevels on the sides. The spoon bowl here. Let's kind of take off. I like to take off a good bevel in the front to act as like kind of like a little edge, a scooping edge, if you will. And what that will also do, and I go across the grain there, I'm not too worried about it, is when you stick this spoon on a surface. Let's see if this one balances yet. Oh, not bad. It'll hold this tip up just a little bit tiny more. And then we're gonna round this over. And now it's kind of awkward because earlier when we came this way with the spoon, we came in and rotated. But this way, I'm coming down and I'm gonna match this facet and this bevel, but I'm gonna soften it as I come into the bowl and actually flatten it out this way. Rather, when I was coming this way, I was rotating the knife for more angle as I came up. And that will get you a smoother transition down into the bowl from the top surface. If you have any questions, throw them out there. Yeah, basically now we're just testing and tweaking and making things as nice as we want them to be. Now is when you start. Now is when you really start nitpicking your work. Is what I always kind of think. And we'll take down our dimensions to where we see fit. No sharp corners. I'm not a big fan of big, very geometric shapes and all that. But now this transition into the neck here, instead of coming down and then coming back, I can just go right into the back of the spoon. And I can take that all the way into it. I'm left with a super smooth surface there.
Nice.
Kind of nitpick a little bit over here. Take out some of that.
I'm one of the people who doesn't do a lot of the challenges, even though I come and watch a lot of the time. But this one is so different than what I carve. I think I'm definitely have to try this one because this is very different than the type of spoons that I normally carve. So I think it'll be fun to try something different.
You've hooked Ron.
Oh my gosh, I've done it.
That's also a really good idea. Making the splice in the top there where you can tuck your knife into there. That's a good idea also.
Oh yeah, this was great. I love this. This was a natural split that happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't do my knife work at my stump. I do it inside the house after I'm done, so that it's not as good for me, but that's a great idea. I like that.
Ron loves a multi-tool.
Yeah,
I do.
I'm a sucker for it too. I do a lot of handyman work for money. And I love a good multi-tool. So basically, I'm gonna just come up around the back, then back here, kind of clean it up to where you want it. And then this is one thing that I always try and do with all my spoons is this very, very tip is still from the original surface that I axed out. I actually accentuate that and actually bevel that back flat. So that way you get a nice flat right there. I don't know if you can see that very well. There you go.
Yeah,
Tiny little bit of flat. And what that does is now when I set the spoon down, it's got a reference face to sit on the handle there.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good idea.
Yep.
So I think at this point you kind of really get to the nitpick stage. And we might come in with a spoon knife a little bit more and kind of round over some of these corners in the back of the bowl. Kind of just using that downward technique or coming down the grain. And here's this corner of the spoon is always the most awkward for a right-hander because it's very difficult to get the blade to come in and around because then you're coming up into the handle and all that. And then from this side, you're kind of limited on the shape of the spoon knife itself to get you there.
The opposite corner for us lefties.
But I do carry a left-handed knife. I carry a left-handed knife, a Scorp. I got a couple other random spoon knives, probably just like all of us that we thought we needed or we think would come in handy, and they do. They always do. Especially for the first time you use them. But I think after a while, I got into just not so much being a minimalist, but not wanting a lot of clutter on my work surfaces and my bench when I'm carving. So here, I'm going to take this down to as close of a finished surface in the bowl as I can, as well as the back here. I'm a huge advocate for getting as far as you can while the wood is still green. Because in my mind, finishing cuts they are in a sense to make little final tweaks and adjustments. But when you're carving spoons for an attempt at profit, you want to not spend 20 minutes doing finishing cuts. You literally just want to be refreshing a surface if it needs it. This pear is really hard, and I think that it's going to take a finish really well. So it'll probably just, I'll get as close as I can. And then, yeah, that's probably
Thanks.
done.
Yeah,
That's-
thanks,
I'd
Kyle.
say that's probably about it.
Cool. That was super
I-
helpful. I think that helped out a lot with understanding how to carve a keel and stuff. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you very
John,
much for doing
thanks for
this.
Sure
setting
do,
this up.
Kyle.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate, John. Eventually, I want to have I think all of us, we want, the reason why we have this is because we don't have maybe a carving club near us.
Yeah.
Or in state. Like, outside of John, there's maybe 2 or 3 spoon carvers that I know of in Colorado. And Colorado's huge. It's like 400 miles wide and 350 miles tall. Like, it's just a giant square.
Yeah.
And for it to be so sparse blows my mind. Like, you folks over in the UK and in Scotland and in Wales and Britain, and you have such a higher density population there that are carving within, let's say, an hour's drive or an hour and a half's drive. Like, if you really want to push it and drive 3 hours, like, you have that opportunity. And out here we're it's pulling hen's teeth to get a group together at times.
Well, geez, join us on Rise Up,
Hey,
man.
can I just say one more
Or-
time, just that we have the I'm gonna take the spotlight off of Kyle for a second and just we have the template up here on the website. This is what it looks like. You can print it out. I'm running out of ink, obviously. But it will be great to try this, and then we're gonna show and tell this spoon on the 27th. So if you carve one, come back on the 27th and show us what you carved.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And there's a
say-
hashtag for Instagram also. Is the hashtag on the sheet?
Yes, this is right at the top.
Okay, yeah.
Hashtag spoon
So if
challenge
you,
one.
the hashtags can be broken sometimes, but if you put it on there with that hashtag, a lot of us will be able to see it, so we can see what you've
Yep.
done. So
Yeah. So I will officially stop the recording and we can chit chat. But thank you so much, Kyle, and thanks for arranging.
And